What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video. This is the first video in a little series that we're going to be doing over the next few weeks, getting my S14 track car ready for the tune. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I'm super passionate about drifting. I finally got my drift car ready towards the end of last year. Some unfortunate circumstances meant that I had to sell it, but now we're getting back into it. We've got a new shell and we're going to build this one better than the old one. Yesterday I towed the Zafiro to the lockup and I jacked it up and I pulled the front subframe out of it to rub it so we can chuck it into this S14. For those of you that aren't familiar with this setup, this is the original setup that came out of my old track car. It's RB subframe. The steering rack mounts have been shifted about 30mm forward to eliminate a lot of the steering bind that you get in Nissans. Cut knuckles. The point where the tie rod mounts to has been shifted inward and down. You shift it inward for quicker steering feel, and you shift it downward because the factory arms are designed to slope downward. So when you lower a car, they sort of sit more flat. So you make that pickup point further down and it corrects the geometry of your steering, it gives you better steering feel. Also got 30mm extended LCAs. We got A32 tie rods, standard S14 tie rod ends. You guys have just recently seen me rebuild these R33 GDST big brakes. And lastly, I've just got this steering column U-joint extension because we've had the rack shifted forward. It just makes up for the little space that's left. First thing we're going to be doing today is we are going to be chucking this front subframe in. Setting a subframe up is super straightforward. You guys have seen me do it a million times, so I'm just going to set the camera up and we'll get into it. Got all the front set up in place, but before I go tightening the nuts on the underside of the brackets there for the subframe, I'm just going to put the struts in because the rack's been moved forward. I've got to turn it full lock to be able to access the back nut. The suspension that I'm going to be running on this track car is actually the original suspension that I ran on my old track car, and that's this set of TSD coilovers that they hooked me up with a while ago, and so I have to be running these again. I do need to change the spring rates out though, because the springs on these I think are suited more for an SR20 setup, not an RB. RBs are quite a bit heavier, so I think I need to just go to a slightly stiffer spring rate in the front just to stop the front end from diving when I initiate or I transition. We now have the complete front setup all together. We got the subframe, steering rack, arm, suspension, brakes all on the front. So now I'm going to move on to the rear. I robbed this subframe out of my street S14. A few videos ago, you guys would have seen that we used my old subframe out of my old track car in Jackson's S14. So I'm actually taking the old one that came out of his that Matt broke the nut in here for the diff mount. So I've got to get that fixed, but I also want to put some GK Tech solid subframe bushes in it, the diff bushes for the rear, and I also want to do the subframe reinforcement kit, just a bunch of plates to get welded in just to make the subframe a bit stronger. So I'll do all that before we go to the track, but again, just because we're on the tight time frame, we're going to chuck this subframe in just for the tune. The diff I'm going to be putting in this, I think this is a 4-1. It's a Locky 3x2 axles, running the TSD in the rear as well. For the tune, going to be running standard rear arms, but again, before we go to the track, I'm going to put some adjustable camber and some adjustable toe arms. Obviously, we're running 5-stud in the rear, but I might not use these hubs. I'm definitely not going to be using those brake rotors. I'm going to take the R32 rear big brakes that are on the Zafiro and chuck them on this subframe before we go to the track, just because, you know, that's gonna, the two pot's gonna lock up the wheel a bit better with the hydro, a lot better than the single piston would. Just went to grab the jack, forgot that I didn't do up the nuts for the subframe there, so I did those up. But this is what I was talking about before, why I wanted to get the struts on first so I could turn the wheels. So if I turn the wheels in, it gives me enough clearance to be able to get to that nut, so otherwise the boot interferes with it. First thing we do before we can chuck this whole setup in the car is we got to get the diff and axles into the subframe. Our rear subframe is now complete with our diff and axles being in. This thing is ready to go into the S14, and then once that's in, we can chuck our TSD coilovers in the back, and then we can put some wheels on this thing and we can get it on the ground off jack stands for the first time in my ownership, and I'm getting pretty excited to see it on the ground for the first time. I've got a pretty cool vision in my head for this, and it's starting to come together, even though it's still a completely bare hack of a shell. Got a plan. Just like that, we have both of the subframes in the S14, front and rear, diffs in, suspensions in. Now I'm about to chuck these wheels on, because these are the wheels that I am going to be putting on this for now. These initially were for my track car, sold the track car, and then I was going to be putting them on the Zafiro, and then they wound up on my Street 14, and now they're winding up on this Track 14. So I think they'll look pretty good. I'm going to chuck the 25mm spacer back on the front. We took it off when we put this setup on the Zafiro because the spacer wasn't needed, but on this setup, definitely want to run the spacer, so we'll put that back on before we chuck the wheels on. Would you look at that, boys and girls? It looks like an absolute sack of shit. In all seriousness, I'm actually over the moon that this thing is on the ground and rollable and it's off jack stands. I'm so beyond excited to have a drift car going again. If you guys have watched my channel for a while now, you guys will know how much drifting means to me. I live it, I breathe it, I absolutely love it, and I can't wait to get back to the track. And this S14 is going to be better than the old one in more ways than one. But yeah, we got the subframes in front and rear, wheels are on, and I'm starting to get a better picture in my head of what this thing is going to look like. I'm not going to be painting it the same color as the old S14. I will be doing a different color. The color that I'm thinking of is more of a basic bland color, I guess you'd say, compared to the blue. But the thing is with that, we can always chuck a really gangster livery on top of that when we go to compete. But for the rear, I also chucked these S14 lights in. This side I had to bash quite a little bit. You can kind of see a little bit in there. I spent probably 10 minutes on that side with a hammer just trying to straighten it out so I could fit this light in. I've got it in there somewhat. It doesn't fit the best around here. This side, by the looks of it, hasn't been crashed or anything, but yeah, I don't think this was crashed either. I just think when it was cut out, something's caught it at the bottom and just pushed it in. But yeah, either way, I'm gonna fix that up a little bit better when we get the bumper and guards on. Yeah, I can make sure that everything lines up properly, because even though I'm gonna drive the absolute shit out of this car, I'm gonna crash it, I'm gonna smash it up, I want to make it look as pretty as I can before the season, smash it up over the season, and then yeah, next winter we can make it look pretty again. In Sunday's video that will be coming out, we will be putting the motor and gearbox into this. I've got the 25 det here that came out of my old track car. We got the big box that was going to be going into that, which will be going on the back of that and then into that. And I've also picked up this Mantic 4-puck clutch. I actually picked the clutch up a while ago off a mate, Dylan James from 870 Drift, so shout out, bro. But yeah. Next video, we're gonna chuck all that stuff in. I'm gonna stop rambling on. Cheers for watching, guys. You know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next video.